Hey friends, there are so many things you can do with cornmeal. It's not just for creating delicious cornbread, but it's great for budget cooking because there are so many delicious casseroles and main dishes that can be made with it. In this video, I'm going to share some of my favorite cornmeal recipes. I like to use a regular cornmeal, but sometimes it's fun to use the little Jiffy corn muffin mixes. They're great because they're inexpensive and they make for a super quick meal. In this video, I wanted to make pancakes as a basis for some breakfast that I was making, but I also like to have this for dinner. And I use some jalapeno, but sometimes I like to use some green chilies or even sliced green onions. They just add a lot of flavor to the corn cakes. And in case you missed it, I just add some water and an egg to the mix. And then sometimes I add in various other ingredients depending on what I'm after. For this, my main toppings are going to be an egg, and then I'm going to do like a Tex-Mex kind of style. I'm going to add the black beans, an over easy egg, the avocado, and the tomatoes. And I like this Mexican crema because it's a little bit thinner than sour cream and it's just easier to spread throughout my dish. And then I top this with some cilantro. I make a lot of variations of this same breakfast because I just love it so much. Sometimes I'll put the egg and the beans and all of that on a tortilla, and it's really good. And I think I would probably like this even better using just regular cornmeal, but I haven't tried that yet. There's just something so easy about using these little Jiffy cornbread mixes. It's also great because you can make the pancakes up in advance and then just put those in the fridge and make some easy breakfasts throughout the week. For my next meal, I'm making Mexican cornbread casserole. I'll put a link to the recipe in the description area of my video. This recipe serves 8 and it's a very hearty meal. For my family, I'll be making half with the ground beef and the other half I'll be making with black beans. I used 2 of the Jiffy corn muffin boxes, along with 2 eggs, a can of creamed and sweet corn, along with a pound of ground beef. I used 2/3 cup of water in mixing up the cornbread, but the original recipe does call for milk. And then I'm just going to spread this out in my pan. And like I said, I'm going to be covering half of this with the ground beef mixture and the other half with the beans. And the recipe calls for some taco seasoning on the beef, which you can either make your own, which is what I probably did here, or you can use, the little taco seasoning in the packet. But I can add the recipe for you in the description to make homemade taco seasoning. It's actually quite easy. And then I added in some tomatoes into this mixture. And the original recipe called for rotel, so if you have that, go ahead and use it. If not, you could just add tomatoes. You can also add in some green chilies. I just love using green chilies along with cornbread. They really do make a delicious smelling dish, and they do season the entire thing. I've been so excited for fall this year and all the delicious kind of cooking that comes with that, including lots of casseroles. And I've especially been thinking a lot about cornbread lately. And in particular, I haven't been able to stop thinking about those hush puppies that I made that I'm actually going to show you at the end of this video. But this casserole really turned out delicious. In fact, my whole family really loved that. And I think one of the reasons was all the toppings that we added on to this recipe to make it so special. And here I'm just adding some cheddar. And if you want your cheese to be kind of gooey, you can wait till the very end to add it on right before it's finished cooking. I bake this at 350 for 35 minutes, and you can just check it by inserting a toothpick to make sure it comes out clean. But then to add my own little twist onto this recipe, I decided to add some shredded cabbage and some sour cream and tomatoes and avocados and cilantro. These were just items that I already had in this extreme budget video that I'd purchased, and so it just really worked, and it made this so good because the casserole is kind of heavy anyway, so you just need those extra toppings to make this a 10. And this really was a 10. In fact, I can't wait to make this again. Again, I'll put the recipe for this in the description area of my video in case you want to try this at home. This next recipe is one of my all-time favorite comfort foods. If you've never had spoon bread before, it's a moist cornmeal dish that is prevalent in the southern United States. It's much moister than cornbread, which is why they call it spoon bread. To me, it's more like a casserole. Here are the ingredients to make my Mexican spoon bread. I'll start by cracking 2 eggs into a deep bowl. I always keep cream-style corn and diced green chilies on hand just for this recipe. If you were trying to cut some corners and some costs with this recipe, you could probably use one of the Jiffy cornbread mixes. However, I do recommend cornmeal. It's coarser in texture and it's less sweet. It's just going to work better in this dish. The recipe calls for 3/4 cup milk, but I don't have milk and I'm looking to cut costs, so I'm just using water. It'll turn out fine. I started craving this last night, but it was the end of the day and I was just too tired to make it. Plus it was almost past my dinner time already, so I thought I'd just make this today and I would share it with you. The recipe calls for 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda and 1 teaspoon of salt. And whether I'm making regular cornbread or the spoon bread, I always get my pan hot first and add a little bit of oil so that the bottom of my cornbread gets a nice texture. I'm going to pour in 1/2 of the batter and then I'm going to top it with 1/2 of the green chilies. And I'll spread those out just a little bit so that each bite has the green chilies in them. And then I'll add 1/2 of my extra sharp cheddar cheese, but you can use really any cheese that you have. And if you wanted to use pepper jack, that would be good here as well. My favorite is the extra sharp cheddar though. Anyway, then I'm going to top it with the rest of the batter. And then I'll add the remaining green chilies, and I'm not going to add the remainder of the cheddar cheese until it's almost finished cooking. This goes into a hot oven at 400 degrees, and I'm going to cook this for about 45 minutes, but I'll pull it out at 40 minutes and check it, and then add the cheddar cheese. I had a couple of green onions that need to be used up, and I was just going to clip them into this on the top. That would have looked really pretty, but I forgot to do it. I was too excited about this meal actually. I've always eaten it pretty much just like this, but you could add mushrooms on the top, or you could even add some broccoli or some other vegetables if you wanted to. It also might be fun to try adding in some smoked sausage on the top, and then you would just have a 1-dish meal. This pretty much is a 1-dish meal for me because when I eat this, I don't want to share stomach space really with anything else because it's just that good to me. Plus it smells so good cooking, and this is great for leftovers. It reheats really well in the microwave. So I pretty much just keep eating this until it's gone. So it'll be my breakfast, lunch, and dinner until it's no longer in the house. So at this point, I'm just going to top it with the remaining cheddar cheese and then pop it back in the oven for just a few minutes until the cheese is just melted. I did go ahead and plate this with some black beans just to try to be a little bit more suitable, even though this really was my entire dinner. And I ended up going back for a 3rd piece because it was just so good. Anyway, if you guys have never tried spoon bread, go into it with an open mind, just knowing that it's going to be much, much more moist than cornbread. And it's not sweet. It's definitely a savory flavor, but the green chili is just, oh my gosh, the flavor is amazing. I hope you guys try this, and I hope that you love it as much as I do. In these next clips, I'm going to show you, I was doing a $5 extreme budget, and I was playing around with some Jiffy cornbread mix, and I came up with some really delicious ways to use it. And so I wanted to show you those here. The first thing I wanted to do was just make some basic batter for some muffins. But before I do that, I need to chop up my jalapeno. I want to get some flavor from this without all the heat. When you roll your peppers, it does help to dislodge all of those seeds, and there's a lot of heat in the seeds, so I want to make sure that I get rid of all of those. And I'll use the rounds to garnish my dish with, and I'll use the chopped jalapeno to flavor my cornbread. I want to try something new with this cornbread mix. I've never made hush puppies on my channel, and so I thought I would try to make at least a few with this mix, and then I'll also make some regular muffins. Normally the box calls for milk, but I'm going to be using water, and because I want my batter to be thick in order to form the hush puppies, I'm only going to add just enough water to get it to the right consistency. Then I'll pull out my hush puppies and I'll add the remaining water to make my regular muffins. I accidentally added a little too much water, so I thickened it back up with some flour, but that's also a good trick to have in case maybe you need to stretch out your mix to get one more muffin. For example, it makes 6, but maybe you need 7 muffins. You can also just add more regular cornmeal. So I did this a couple times until I got the right consistency for my hush puppies. This was just about perfect. You want it to form a ball and be able to stay in that ball in order to fry it. I'm also thinking about trying one in my air fryer. So I'll just pull out the amount that I want, and then I'm going to put those in the fridge until tomorrow or the next day when I want to fry those up. Then I added a little more water back in to thin it out to a regular cornbread consistency and added in my jalapenos. I think I'll make some regular size muffins and also some cornbread bites. So I have 4 regular muffins, 4 cornbread bites, and 4 hush puppies that are still in the fridge waiting to be cooked. I ate the muffins throughout the week with my various meals that I made. Here was a cold pasta salad that I had, and then I had also made a soup. And since we are entering soup season, let this just be my reminder to you that cornbread makes a great accompaniment to that. And actually, here was another soup that I made, I think that same week, that I ended up having some red lentils in, and I had it plain like this one night, and then the second night I used the immersion blender on it and blended that up and had it that way. I had thought I would try a couple of these in the air fryer and compare them with the fried ones, but I didn't feel like getting my air fryer out. Unfortunately, I have a small kitchen, so I don't have enough counter space for all of my appliances. So if anybody has tried hush puppies in the air fryer, let me know how they turn out. I'm sure I would like regular cornbread hush puppies much better, but still I think these will be good, and they're browning up nicely. So here's my final meal. We have the red lentil curry, which is also called dal. First, I'm going to try the hush puppies. They're crispy on the outside and surprisingly fluffy and moist on the inside. I actually think these are moister with a better texture than the muffins I made. I think that's probably because they were fried quickly instead of in the oven where they have more of a chance to dry out. I forgot to add a little oil into this batter like I talked about earlier that I was going to do. Anyway, the curry is delicious also. It has a touch of heat to it, but it's not overbearing, if that makes any sense. I would say this meal is a huge success. I enjoyed this, and I can't wait to try these hush puppies again. And next time, I'm going to put some corn in them and maybe even some cheese or green chilies. There's so many different things you could do with these hush puppies. And I do love the fact that I was able to make hush puppies with that Jiffy cornbread mix. It's a nice shortcut. My parents were very poor. Some of you may remember that video where I shared how one of my favorite childhood memories was a time when my dad got us a big bunch of food to eat when we didn't have any. It was wonderful. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because a lot of us with impoverished backgrounds have emotional associations with food. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why I do this channel. When I used to go to my grandma's house, she made me feel so loved, and she was always cooking me the most delicious food. And so I kind of grew up with this association of when you love someone, you feed them well. Food is my love language, and it's why I always get excited when I have a delicious recipe to share with you guys, because everyone deserves to eat well. Anyway, today I'm making a meal that I grew up eating probably 90% of the time. And I love this meal, and it's very inexpensive to make. I purchased this Quaker brand at Walmart because it was less expensive and sold in a smaller quantity, but I've always used the Albers brand in the past, and that's been good. I have this leftover red onion in the fridge, but I usually use white, but I'm just going to go ahead and use this and I'm sure it'll be fine. And I'm going to make some potatoes, and I'm also going to be making some fried okra in cornmeal. I've got some frozen okra that I'm going to be using. This was actually a treat that I ended up eating at my grandma's. My mom almost never made that for us. I'm not sure if it was because she couldn't afford it or maybe it wasn't available in the stores where we lived. I got something else in this container from Sam's Club, and then when I was done, I just washed it out and used it as a bulk storage container, and I love the way these look in my pantry. I have lots of delicious recipes for beans, so I always like to have a good supply of these. I also have a big supply of black beans. These are probably my two favorite beans, although I have been eating a lot of chickpeas lately. In the video I referred to earlier when I talked about my childhood, I mentioned how when you're food insecure as a child, you have a tendency to want to keep a lot of food around as an adult. And me pouring food from my large food storage containers kind of reminded me of that. But many of you posted comments after that video on how much you could relate to that feeling of wanting to have food around to make you feel secure and just to give you peace of mind. My grandma went through the Great Depression, so she had food stored everywhere in her house, and honestly, going to her place was like going to Disneyland for me. I have memories of my grandma standing and picking through her beans, but manufacturing has developed so much that today the beans are so clean, I almost never find anything in them. This is probably an unnecessary step now. I only found this one small piece of broken bean that I'm pulling out. I normally cook beans in my crock pot, but today I need them to cook quicker, so I'm just boiling them in my Dutch oven with lots of water. And about halfway through, I usually add in my salt, and I cook them till they are just tender. I don't like them to be overly tender to where they kind of mush up, especially since a lot of times the day after I'll use these and make like a chipotle bowl with them. Some of my viewers are allergic to beans and simply can't eat them, but some of my viewers haven't eaten beans at all, so it might upset their stomach if they eat a lot all at once. If you're new to eating these, I suggest eating a small amount and then increasing the amount that you eat over time. I'll make a pan of cornbread to go along with this meal, and I'm going to be using this milk because I have it in my fridge. However, I have frequently substituted water for milk and it always turns out just fine. There was never milk in my house growing up, so I think maybe she was using powdered milk, but I was talking to a viewer the other day and she was saying even the powdered milk is expensive now, so if you can't afford it, I think I would just go ahead and use water. I'll put the recipe for you in the description area of my video, but I'm actually using the Albers cornmeal recipe. And like I said, it's the one I've always used. I've always loved it. The only difference I can really see on how people make their cornbread is that some people like theirs a little sweeter. This recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of sugar, and that's exactly how I like mine. And you could also substitute out those little boxes of, pre-mix cornbread for, I think they're 63 cents right now. But those are a touch sweet, and this is my favorite way to make cornbread. If you have some big eaters in your family and you're trying to save money on food, this is a great meal to make because with a bag of potatoes, some eggs, some cornmeal, and beans, you can make so many meals for the week. One of the tricks to making a good cornbread is to make it in a well-seasoned cast iron skillet. You can use a different kind of pan, but just make sure it's non-stick. I understand that not everybody has a cast iron skillet. It cooks it perfectly and prevents the cornbread from sticking. I've always liked a nice crust on mine, so I pour a little oil in the bottom of the pan and I get it very hot before I pour in the batter. See how the cornmeal is sizzling when it hits the oil? That's exactly what you want. And then immediately after pouring the batter in, I put it in a 400-degree oven for 25 minutes. This cornbread is perfect. It's crispy on the bottom and fluffy on the inside. This kind is much lighter and fluffier than the kind in the little boxes. If there's ever a time that I like to use butter, it's with cornbread. If you haven't tried it this way, you owe it to yourself to make it at least once. There's nothing better than a fresh pan of cornbread, and it makes a great accompaniment to so many different kinds of meals. I'm also going to be making some fried potatoes with onions to go with this dish, and I just really wanted to cook these in the cast iron skillet. Otherwise, I could have been making these while my cornbread was cooking, but I only have 2 cast iron skillets. I have the regular size one and then a little mini one that my son got me for Christmas. While those are cooking, I'm going to make just a little snack, and this is how I like to do it. I like to break up a little bit of the cornbread and then just pour some of the beans over with that delicious broth. I don't add anything besides salt to mine. I know my grandma used to add like a ham hock to it, but I find that the regular bean seasoning just by itself is delicious. And then I added a little bit of this Louisiana hot sauce. I accidentally picked up the extra hot, but it's not really that hot, so it's been fine. Sometimes I like to mix this in with salsa, but this is just so good. The flavoring of the bean broth goes over that cornbread, and it's such a satisfying meal. I usually cook my potatoes about halfway through before I add in the onions, just to make sure that my onions don't burn. Then I add pepper and garlic salt. While my potatoes are cooking, I'm going to make the fried okra, and I haven't made this in years. I'm using frozen okra that I just thawed out, and I think this would be better with fresh, but this is what I have. And when I've made this before, I just cooked mine with only cornmeal without the egg, but I looked online and the recipes with the most positive reviews were dipped in egg. It's not supposed to be a thick batter. It's just supposed to be enough to give it a little bit of a coating, and I salted the mixture in there and then fried it in a hot pan until they were crispy. I'm excited to eat this meal. The only reason I don't make it more often is because it does feel like a lot of cooking, but this is a meal that you can cook once and eat twice with the next day. I've always enjoyed this as leftovers, and when you're eating on a super tight budget and need to feed big eaters, you're either going to need to cook or you're going to need to increase the budget. Okay, let's try the okra first. Okay, it's nice and crunchy. It doesn't taste as airy and light as the kind that I remembered. And I'm not sure if it's because of the egg batter or because I used the frozen okra. So I need my Southern cooks to leave me comments about that. In one of my $1 a day challenges, instead of making fried green tomatoes, I made fried red tomatoes and I dipped them in a cornmeal batter and they were so good. And then you could top them with a little ranch dressing. You could also do that if you don't like okra. There's probably quite a few vegetables that you could roll in cornmeal and fry, and they would be delicious. These potatoes are really, really good too. It's amazing how good they are if you just add some onions and garlic salt to them. My dad used to either eat this meal with ketchup or he would eat this meal alongside a wedge of white onion. Southerners have lots of other things that they do with cornbread. Like my grandma used to eat cornbread and milk. That was one of her favorite treats. With this one box of Jiffy, I made some corn fritters with a sour cream dip. I made a couple jalapeno cornbread muffins, and I also tried the batter as a breading for zucchini. And for that, I just made the batter a little thicker and then added some seasonings to this mix. I served these alongside some marinara and these were so delicious. I discovered in this video how good Jiffy Mix is just as a batter for vegetables. And another thing you could do if you want to increase the texture is to add some regular cornmeal in here, and it'll give it a little bit more of a grainy texture if that's what you're after. But this is really delicious. I use the same corn batter and added some regular corn to this. Sometimes I use cream style corn if I want to thin it out a bit, or I'll just add in regular corn like I did here to make the fritters. And I made a sour cream sauce that I added some seasonings to and some fresh herbs. This was Italian parsley, but you could also use cilantro. And then I just added a little onion powder to this mix. And then I just fried the little fritters. And I think I had some pieces of jalapeno in here as well. This would be a great accompaniment to some fried chicken or even some baked salmon. Or in my case, maybe some of those little chicken nuggets that I like to eat. And I'm sure there are a variety of sauces that you could make with this. Another thing that I would like to put in these would be some of those green chilies. But then again, I think every single cornbread dish should have some of those green chilies in it. In fact, I love chilies so much that I've contemplated going to the Hatch Chili Festival in Hatch, New Mexico. I think that sounds like a lot of fun. I love food events. So we made some chili, and I thought it would be fun to try some chili over one of these fritters. And the fritters themselves are a little bit soft, but it was really delicious over the top. It just made for a really nice meal. And then I added some cheese. And then these were just some other shots of some meals that I had made with the cornbread. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching my video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Now, I think you should go and make something delicious with cornbread. And if you do, make sure you take a photo of it and tag me on either Instagram or Facebook. Thanks so much for watching, friends. I'll see you next week.
Morning has broken, my windows are open. Wanna feel the wind blow through my hair. Which way do I follow? What happens tomorrow? I turn to you and hope you can guide the way. Sometimes I give up, just wanna be on my own. Even in the darkest times, you give me hope. So